The demise of the Catholic Church is happening faster now because of the new Pope. Hey guys, it's John sitting here in the studio drinking a glass of water. Hope you guys are having a great Sunday morning. The new Pope, Pope Leo, is completely speeding up the demise of the Catholic Church. John, how can you say that? He's a new Pope. He's the first American Pope. Exactly. But Pope Leo is doubling down on Paul, not the teachings of Joshua. And, you know, if God is love, then love in any form cannot be wrong. And in his recent speech, Pope Leo doubled down on Paul's line of marriages between a man and a woman. He also doubled down on the Catholic doctrine of it is the only faith, which only creates division in the world. He's literally doubling down on things that take you away from loving one another, takes you away from the divinity within yourself, and puts it into the theology of the church itself. There's growing concern among Catholics and ex-Catholics alike that the church's leadership is steering us deeper into doctrines of St. Paul, right? That it's literally setting aside the teachings of love, the love-centered teachings of Jesus. So what does this mean for us in the world? For those Catholics who are living in that faith, and for the rest of us who have to succumb to or experience the judgment and hate and doctrines and dogmas that damage the world from the Catholic faith. And I say that very specifically. Catholic faith is the deadliest religion in the world, and it still is one of the most problematic. Well, it still is the most problematic religion in the world. Islam has 1/3 the body count of the Catholic faith. 1/3. So it doesn't even come close to being as harmful to the world as Catholicism does. I mean, Catholicism didn't just single out other religions. It singled out other Christians. That's why America was formed. It was Christians fleeing Europe to create a place where they could worship freely without the Catholic faith telling them that they're wrong and sending the Inquisition to get them, right? So it literally is the most deadly religion in the world, and the more it leans into this concept that Saint Leo just said of it being the only faith, you have just said that the other, well, in Christianity, 30% of the world are Christian, but only 20% of them are Catholic. So, you're literally down into the very low numbers. Those people saying that the rest of the world, the other 80% of the world, are wrong, and that you have to believe as they do. They're just creating more and more strife. Unfortunately, there's a lot of people in power who have that Catholic faith. So what's happening under this new pope? This new pope did something really interesting to me. Popes are supposed to be infallible, and he first thing he did was come on and change all of Francis's rules. He started saying, Francis started softening towards people who love differently than they. So, and he came in and said, no, 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 he was wrong for doing that. We're doing this. Basically, he's undoing the things of Francis, because this concept of Catholic papal infallibility is an absolute aberration that harms the world in big ways, because whoever gets into power in the Catholic Church, the church has to follow what he says because he's infallible, right? There's in the world right now, there are people dropping into various camps, and the Catholics especially are dropping into this very traditionalist, dogma-heavy rhetoric and obedience-centered messaging. They're telling you have to believe we are the only way. You have to love only the way we say for you to love. The Pope literally says marriage is between a man and a woman. That's St. Paul's teachings. That's not Joshua's teachings. He never said anything about marriage. The people say, well, he went to the wedding feast of Cana. Yeah, he went to a wedding. I've been to weddings. Have you been to weddings? You know, it really comes down to just because he went to one doesn't mean he can that he and if that wedding was between the man and the woman, it doesn't mean that he is saying that's the only way. He went to a wedding. I've been to what beautiful weddings where, two men got married. Beautiful weddings. And this whole concept, this whole construct that love is limited when God is love, it makes no sense. The fact that Pope Leo is leaning into Paul's teachings and hierarchy, submission, roles of women. Paul's the one who said that women shouldn't speak. Paul's the one who said that women shouldn't be allowed to read the Torah. Paul's the one who said that women are lesser than. You know, Paul's the one who told them that every one of them should be celibate. Please, Catholics, please celibate. Go do what Paul said. If you're going to follow Paul all the way. Be celibate. Well, that'll kill the church even faster, right? This concept of sexual morality is ridiculous. Sex is a natural function of the human body. There's this concept of, you shouldn't have sex, or you should be ashamed of your sex, or the sexual encounters, right? You know, y- there's, as a child, people are told that masturbation is terrible. Well, masturbation is a natural function of the human animal. They do that. Children do it naturally. People who live into the world do those things naturally. Paul's teachings will tell you that all of that is a sin. It's horrible, that sex is terrible. He's telling you that your natural inclinations are wrong, period. But Paul also believed the second coming was happening in his lifetime, and that the reason everyone should be celibate is because there's no need to have children. This concept that he is saying, we have to subjugate women, we have to deny our own desires of love, and not be allowed to express ourselves in ways that of loving as we would like to love. Now, I'm married 3 times. I'm divorced 3 times, right? Church doesn't like that, right? My second marriage made me an adulterer according to the church, right? I never got a church annulment. I never got a church annulment. Why? Because the marriage itself is originally a religious construct. It's created by religions to create more people in the religion. And the fact that I got divorced means that I did a civil thing within society and got divorced. But the church denies I got divorced. So the church says, no, you didn't get divorced because you never got annulled in the church. So you have to, you're an adulterer because you got remarried. It's all about control. And Pope Leo just literally put us back into a time when the Catholic Church was even more controlling, more in charge of your life. And as I've said on other videos, 54% of Catholics have left the faith over the past 20 years. 54%, more than half. Why did they leave? Because of these things that Pope Leo is doing. This will absolutely make more people leave the faith. And I'm kind of grateful, because that feeling of people should be allowed to love, the people should be able to do those, have their own expression of life. Buddhists aren't going to hell. Hindus are not going to hell. Muslims are not going to hell. Jews are not going to hell. Paul would say they are. Paul would say that didn't take the death and resurrection of Jesus as their saving grace. And so they are wrong. And then of course the Catholic Church would then, if moving forward, would then start to persecute them for not believing as they do. And now a quick word from our sponsor. Coffee Time with John. This channel runs off coffee, so get your coffee and tea at johnsjoe.com. This pivot backwards is not a progression forward. It's a degradation of the faith even further than it already is. That 54% will soon be 60. And we have the greatest ally in the world on our side right now, watching that happen, Pope Leo. There's a divide between what Paul taught and Joshua taught. Joshua taught love, compassion, inclusion, forgiveness, and direct access to God. He didn't say you need a middleman. He never said you needed a spirit guide or Jesus himself. He said you have direct access to God. The kingdom of heaven is within you. Ye are gods. Paul, he was the one who was preaching control and sin consciousness and separation from God unless you follow strict doctrines. That's the Paul's teachings. Pope Leo just leaned into Paul. He set aside the teachings of Joshua and he leaned into what Paul said. The kingdom of heaven is within you. Think about that. Paul said, I do not permit a woman to speak. Quote, unquote. Ask yourself, which one of these sounds more like the pure love of God? Which one of these sounds like the pure love of God that sees equality at all and love at all? Why would the church lean into the teachings of Paul? Why would Pope Leo lean into the teachings of Paul? See, Paul built an institutional foundation that the church still uses today. Paul uses these rules, regulations, and doctrines to keep people in their faith. The Catholic Church has a whole bunch of very expensive real estate they've got to keep paying for. It's got a whole bunch of priests that they've got to keep in a lifestyle that they can live in comfort. The diocese have beautiful homes. In Rehoboth, we used to have a big mansion on the beach, and now there's just a really nice within a half a block of the ocean. This house that the priest lives in, but they had to sell the mansion. Why? People were leaving. People were literally leaving. But that little house that they bought right next to the church, that house is easily worth about $5 million. Right? The church owns all these properties. The church is a money-making endeavor, and it's not about teaching love and compassion for all and loving one another, as Joshua would say. It's about control and keeping people in a place where they can keep the cycle of that foundation of institutional idea moving. The institution only thrives if there's an inflow of money. The church has become the love of money. That's what the church has become. Paul taught authority, obedience, patriarchy, this whole concept of, women shouldn't be allowed to speak. And that's a very useful framework for organized control. That's a framework for keeping people in line. Now, Joshua was anti-institutional. He taught personal empowerment. Greater works than I have done, you will do. He also disrupted the religious elite of the time. He fought against the Pharisees. Paul was a Pharisee. He told me, give to Caesar what is Caesar's. He literally was breaking free of religion. Before Abraham was, I am. Before there was a religious idea of Abraham, which became everything, right? He said before that was just I am. I am declaring, I am creating, I am enjoying, I'm exploring, I am loving. But when Pope Leo leaned into this Pauline teaching, what he just did was he increased guilt. He increased shame, the fear of sin, and disconnection from one's inner guidance, your inner guidance, from that feeling within, that kingdom of heaven within you. It literally is disconnecting you from your own personal connection with God, because now it says you don't have the right to think that way. You don't have the right to love that person no matter what their gender is. You don't have the right to actually say that you might think a different way spiritually than they, because theirs is the only way. This is a disconnection from the connection with God that's always inherent within you. People feeling less spiritually fulfilled will come out of this. They'll be more judged and more unworthy. And what'll happen? More people will leave the faith. It'll be faster. It will speed things up. So thank you, Pope Leo, for speeding up the demise of institutions that hold love away from us, that hold God away from us, that takes this world and makes it more dangerous by creating divisions, but by saying everybody else is wrong and we're the only way. This system pushes people away from direct relationship with the divine and into dependency on them. Joshua said that love was within you. Joshua's message was one of love, freedom, equality, divine empowerment. There was no confessional booths. There was no fear-based obedience, just present moment. I am. You know, he talked about being love, being grace, being unconditional love. That idea of you doing the greater things means that you don't need the middleman. You don't need the rules, the doctrines. You will do greater things because you are empowered. Paul confined people into these doctrines and dogmas, and interestingly enough, they mirror the Pharisees, which Jeshua in the Bible is always railing against the Pharisees. Thank you, Pope Leo. Thank you, Pope Leo, for pushing people away from the fear-based dogmas of the Catholic Church. More people will leave your church because of your positioning on this. More people will come closer to a loving world because you have literally put your stamp on a fearful one, and people will always shy away from the fear. The Catholic Church is a filtered version of God, and the filter is specifically to put you into their funnel. You're allowed to question Paul. You're allowed to walk with love and compassion without the dogma, as Jeshua did. Let go of fear. Though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I shall fear no evil. Everything that Pope Leo just did is fear eliciting. Reclaim your direct connection to love. Step into that idea that you are one with God, that God and you are a positive force together. There is no middleman that you need. There is no doctrine, dogma that you need. If the church is doubling down on Paul, then maybe it's time to double down on Jeshua. Not the Jeshua of dogma, but the real living presence of love that's within you that he spoke of. The one who never asked for obedience, only your awareness that the love within you, that you are the light of the world. You don't need a pope to know God. You just need to show up to love and be love, to live in that loving expression. If God is love, you being love is all you need. You don't need the horrific doctrines and dogmas of Pope Leo, who is undoing some of the positive things that Pope Francis did to put us more towards a loving world and dividing us even further. As the first American Pope, I'm disappointed that he wasn't the one who stepped us towards the actual teachings of Jeshua as opposed to the doctrines of Paul. But I'm grateful to him as well because it will speed up the mass exodus from the Catholic Church, because all he's doing is making people more fearful, more hateful, and in the end, that's the things that make people leave. And that's my thought on this. You guys have a great day, and I'll talk to you soon. See ya. Bye.